Welcome to the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast, powered by Recon Sports, the show where we take a deep dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis, and today we're exploring the intersection of high performance, mental well-being, and leadership, not just for athletes, but for anyone working in high-pressure environments. Our guest is a leadership and career burnout coach with more than 20 years of experience in corporate and talent development. She's worked with Fortune 500 companies and now leads NovaQuest Coaching, where she helps leaders and professionals avoid burnout and unlock their full potential. Laila Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm so excited to be here.
Happy to have you here. So one of the things that we talk a lot about on this show is having a purpose kind of beyond the field, something that drives you as a person and ultimately makes you perform better on the field. And for athletes, especially younger ones, it can kind of be easy to fall into the trap of maybe identifying with that sport or the position, being a linebacker, being a receiver, being a quarterback. Over time that can become someone's entire identity. But when athletes shift that mindset towards a higher purpose, being clear with their thoughts, their intentions, their visions, from your experience, what have you seen when people really anchor themselves to a higher vision or a higher quest, and how does that positively impact their performance?
Yeah, let's unpack that. There's so much in there and so many elements, and one thing throughout my work that I've learned and what's shown me in dealing with leadership, whether you're honestly on the field or in the boardroom, the biggest wins don't come from strategy alone. Like you said, a lot of it is mindset shifts and, how we manage our energy, our boundaries, who we have in our circumference, intentional actions, our consciousness that we're pulling through. And, staying aligned with who we are. And, that's where leadership truly comes in. And a lot of that element, too, is, the mental mindsets that you were talking about, the traps that we can get into when we identify ourselves as what we're doing versus who we're being. So that element is really important in having that clarity up front. So let's break it down a little bit, one step at a time. So the one thing I would say about if we're talking about like root causes of what mindset shifts can get in the way, limiting beliefs, is what happens when there's the intersection between a shift and someone's identity and how they identify their successes. So that can be the lessons beyond, who are you as a person? The curiosity that you're, leading with on learning, exploring, being vulnerable with yourself about who you are beyond an athlete, who you are beyond a leader, how you behave in day-to-day actions, interactions with yourself, with others. How are you monitoring success beyond measures that are given to you? How do you define those success measures? So, the emotional curiosity piece, I think, is that the emotional intelligence, right? That piece that whether you're on the field or you're in the boardroom, that's one of the pieces that can be really important, is you're exploring your identity. Who were you before you were that athlete? Who are you if there's an intersection, a shift, whether you're, a leader or you're an athlete, if you retire, if you injure out, who are you? And are you defining your values around what you're doing versus who you're being? Who are you? So I encourage athletes, to start thinking about performance stats differently, not just how you're performing on the field. How are you performing as a person?
What are some of the stats that maybe like someone can measure that aren't maybe receiving yards or quarterback yards, but like these measures that you're talking about? What are some of those metrics that can maybe be easily identified, easily tracked, and have a good insight into what's going on?
Yeah, and professionals do this too. Like I say we often tie our worth to these metrics, right? So like for a professional, it might be their paycheck, their commission, their title. It goes beyond the field, like this mindset of the identity risks that come into play. So the one thing I say is name your inner critic. Let's start with who this inner committee, I call it, is, who might be chattering and making you tie your identity to these statistics, right? So name that inner critic and challenge that inner critic and really think about, what are your value systems? Go back. The assessment is your core values. Like, what do you define as a good person? Feeling good, feeling well, feeling like you're contributing to your vision of the life experience you want to have, your contributions to your community, your contributions to yourself, to your family, your boundaries that you have and how you stand up for yourself. Are you a good friend? Like, these are some of the measurements that go beyond the field, right? And then in the field, how are you showing up with your teammates? How are you showing up when you don't win? What are you role modeling for your team, whether you're a leader on the team or not? And everyone has their own self-ownership and self-leadership, right? Everyone has, an athletic team is most cohesive when everyone is a leader, frankly, when everyone is working cohesively together. So these are some of the things to assess, because if you move out of athletics, if you move out of a leadership position, you're no longer that title. You're no longer that professional, that athlete. So who are you? So it's getting to the core of who you really want to show up as every day consistently. So that's one of the measures that I recommend for people there is alignment of your vision, your goals, and your values. That intersection is really, really important.
From a coaching perspective, I see a lot in college football right now. We're seeing an emphasis on culture. We're doing a big story with Travis Taylor, the director of player development over at Tennessee, and one of his core pillars of success is culture, and creating an environment where players can be themselves and be that, their authentic selves and express who they are as individuals. But from a coaching's perspective, it's where do you find the balance between letting players kind of be their authentic self, but also have standards and a culture within your program? What would be your advice on maybe juggling those two things?
One, it starts with the coach. Data, metrics, and behaviors are a mirror. It's not something that should be static. It's something that's evolving and with the consciousness of the team as it grows. But it starts with the leader on what is the leader, the coach, role modeling. Vulnerability, the best cultures, especially in athletics, I would say, in teams, is when peers can be vulnerable with one another. There's sponsorship and mentorship, and they're allies and not competitors in the team itself. That builds the culture where you're championing each other. You feel that you trust each other, because the antithesis of that is when they're competing, when there isn't vulnerability, it erodes trust. Culture starts with trust, and trust is earned by what they see. So they've got to see their coach show up vulnerable. They've got to see their coach role model when you fail and fail forward, right? Like, we don't win or lose, we win or learn. If the coach isn't role modeling that, it's going to erode trust. It's going to create undue pressure. Burnout can come in, the competitiveness, divisiveness amongst the team. Trust is one of the main things that are the current, the river, the lifeblood of any team. Without trust, they can't trust each other. That's dangerous on the field. If you're an athlete, if you don't trust your fellow athlete, your life's at risk, right? So the role modeling is really important for the culture. Also, creating that vision that's very clear and consistent, the transparency, making sure that the coach is conveying a consistent message, embodying that. If you're saying we're going to show for each other, how do you embody that as a coach? How are you role modeling that? They've got to see it to believe it. They've got to feel it. It's got to be consistent throughout the behaviors, the actions. A lot of times people forget how you say it, what you say also earns trust. So what language is the coach using to embody that? What body language? Like if the coach is talking like this, crossing his arms, in a defensive manner, but talking about these positive things they're going to build together, they're like, I have a disconnect here. So those are some of the things that can really help to elevate the trust on the team. And the other thing is that open door policy for the coach. And I don't just mean like the door's always open, walk through. It means you're emotionally available. It means that they feel comfortable walking through that door. So how are you cultivating trust, vulnerability, in your team so that when someone is struggling, they don't feel that they're going to be judged. So it's coaching without judgment. It's removing biases. It's calling out the stuff that's eroding the team, consistent communication, strategic communication, adaptive communication. Who's on your team? People are motivated differently. Do you know? Have you had a one-on-one with each one of the athletes on your team to find out how they're individually motivated, what their core value systems are, so you can pull that through their coaching? These are some of the things in that tailoring, that connection that you have with your team, whether it be on the field or in the boardroom or, in a professional organization. Trust is the lifeblood. And then the behaviors that follow suit that support that, I think, are the ways forward. And then checking in and ask your people, am I conveying my message in a way, have I been communicating with you in a way that you feel psychologically safe in a trusting environment? Do you feel valued? Do you feel like your opinions are validated? Even if we go a different direction, do you feel heard? Those are the questions to ask and not assume. So that's where the vulnerability comes in, with the coach really role modeling that and saying, hey, I was wrong. Normalize being wrong. Normalize failing, especially in the athletic world. Failing happens all the time. So you got to fail fast, fail forward. You're failing. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Because if you're afraid to be vulnerable, your team sure the hell is going to be afraid to be vulnerable if you're not willing to do it. So that's what I would say, and what I've seen in the best teams where people were running through walls for their leader. It's because they trust that leader implicitly. They understand that message. They understand the vision. They feel psychologically safe. They feel validated and valued. That's the lifeblood, and trust and vulnerability, I think, are at the core. That's what I would say.
Yeah. No, I love what you said about, it's not always, we always think about what we're going to say, but sometimes we need to put into thought how we're going to say it, how we're going to communicate it. And, one of the things that I love about sports is that mentorship piece and being a coach to cultivate that environment. And, you can really completely change the trajectory of someone's life just by being that coach that you just described there, and in turn being that mentor. We've had guests come on the podcast and share how this has shaped them, not just as athletes, but as people. So how important would you place this emphasis on a holistic development as a coach, and looking at your players as people and not necessarily just as players? Is there maybe any tips or tricks or conversation starters to help them better understand of who their players are as people and not just as athletes?
Yeah. It starts with the mindset of the coach. You're 100% right. Like one of the things that's dangerous about metrics is, they use it like a verdict, or an assessment tool as a verdict, like when the athletes get on their stress tests and stuff, that's the verdict of where you are. You've got to meet that with some conversations. This is a starting point. So the mindset of the coach around how they're going to use the tools, whether they be communication tools, assessments, you got to meet that with humanity. We must treat people with humanity. They're individuals first. They're not an athlete first. They're a human being first. So treat their well-being and their individuality first. Tailor each coaching plan to the individual, to the athlete, which means it requires you to get to know your athlete. Get to know the person you're coaching on a really human level. What makes them tick? What drains them? What energizes them? What are they working towards? What is their vision for their life? What are they afraid of? What do they want to accomplish? What tools and gaps, are there? What can you eliminate for them to help them bridge the gap from where they are? That's the role of a coach, is clearly helping someone define where you are, where you want to be, and the delta in between, and you're helping them, empower them to get there, right? So every athlete's going to say something different, like, I want to win the Super Bowl, or, that's a superficial goal tied to an identity as a athlete. What, go deeper. I always say double click, like a mouse, double click. Okay, what's fueling that? What else makes you happy? What drives you when you're in your scariest moment, or when you're being challenged the most? What drives you? What drains you? What do you see as a leader? what kind of coach, would you want to be partnered with? If I paired you with someone on the team, who do you think you would really jive with? Who would really energize you and motivate you? How about that? Sometimes they pair people, don't even ask people. They don't even know if their communication styles are synergistic. They just assume a tenured person with someone who is less tenured, or someone who's struggling in this area. What about asking, like, double click? Maybe there's people who have similar value systems and similar things that drive them, and that's an extra, accelerator to potential. So I encourage people to spend more time. The data is not a verdict, it's a starting point. Ask more questions and ask yourself as the coach, am I intentionally asking questions that will uncover what I need to know to help empower this person to unlock potential? Do I know what's getting in this person's way?
It's interesting. I love those questions that you just said. And being in the college football space, they have all these different really cool cognition tests, and they track a bunch of awesome metrics that you almost have to be a scientist to understand what it's telling you. But then once you start tracking like those questions that you were just asking, what are your affirmations? What's your +1? Who's your champion? Once you see those and you're able to read those, like, you understand who that person is. And it's like, I know how to go talk to this person right here. I know what drives him. I know how to go coach this kid right here, just asking those simple questions. I think one of the biggest challenges, at the college space compared to the high school space is, at the high school space, coaches, you're kind of stuck with your roster. You're a coach, this is your roster. Okay, now it's time to get to know them. And in the college space, though, you have thousands of people that you're looking at. And one of the biggest things that can destroy your team is having a poor locker room, or having guys come in there and just be cancerous, for lack of a better term, in that locker room. How would you, and it's kind of hard to really judge someone's character or who they are and are they going to fit into our culture when you have thousands of them, and it's not like you can have a one-on-one conversation with them all. So it's like this battle of trying to piece together the best locker room with limited information. What would be your advice on maybe compiling characters and cultures and people without having all of the answers of, or being able to talk to him like one-on-one and really get to know him?
That's a tough one, because you're working in a space of bias and assumption. And so if you can't get to everyone, it becomes even more clear that it's needed the vision and the values, the core values of the team, to be very transparent and clear. So how is the coach communicating the vision for the team, the core pillars of the core values of the team, and how are they going to collect needs for assessment? I firmly believe in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like that pyramid for self-actualization. You've got to get through the different layers of basic needs. If the coach doesn't know the psychological needs are being met, the basic fundamental needs of these team members is not being met, there's a big chance for trust eroding. So the coach is going to have to find a way, if he's not or she is not using assessments of any kind or individual one-on-one conversations, break people into groups and do it another way. Like, you can't make assumptions that you're addressing needs if you're not inquiring, if you're not curious. The coach is going to have to get creative about how to understand the needs of the team so that they can be addressed, so that people can be treated on a human level to address their well-being. It's instances like this where there's a blanket effect where burnout can slip in for certain people, limiting beliefs, fear of failure, imposter thoughts. If you're not addressing these and understanding where people are struggling, people start slipping through the cracks. So there's a lot of engagement surveys that people do in large scale. This is very common in Fortune 500 organizations because they've got thousands of employees. Now, leaders do have teams, sometimes of 20 to hundreds of people, but they are responsible for having one-on-one conversations with those people at least a few times a year through mid-year, year-end review, and, usually any kind of performance management conversations, in between. So, but you can do an engagement survey. Technology is here and it's not going anywhere. Send out an engagement survey. It's anonymous. That helps with the psychological safety and people feeling safe to express themselves. And then you get a quotient of, listen, 25% of you reported blank, like fear of failure or any of those things. I want to address this. I'm going to do a workshop. I'm going to bring a coach in to talk about this. We're going to go do a workshops, an offsite, so that's one way you can do it, and everyone's exposed to it. So people aren't individually, called out, so to speak. Everyone's exposed to this. Look, 25% of the team is saying this to me. I think everybody needs to have this immersion experience. That's one of the ways you can do that. And then try to find out that quotient. Who is the 25%? You got to find it. And you got to find a way, whether that's peer-to-peer mentoring, like I need you to find out where we're struggling as a team and help me create psychological safety so they come to me to ask for the help so I can give them individual support. So that's where you can lean on your team members. Like, I need you guys to really trust each other. If you can't for any reason come to me, I need you to go to one of your teammates. I need you to talk about it. And when safe, I want you to come to me. But I want the coach to ask themselves, if someone doesn't feel safe coming to them, why is that? Why is that?
You mentioned the word there, burnout, and let's almost shift the perspective now for coaches, facilitating other coaches. And I almost think that the definition of burnout could be college football coaches or NFL football coaches. They are living in that building. And, you hear stories from Nick Saban, won the national championship the next day, 7 a.m. meeting, going into next season. It's like, it's very easy to be burned out. And I would assume that some of these coaches are almost maybe living burned out, and that's just the reality. Is there anything that coaches can do to help avoid that and still maintain their peak performance, even though they got to basically live at the facility 24/7?
Yeah, it's a tough one. This is not unique into the athletic world. This happens in Fortune 500 and large-scale organizations, CEOs, startups, where people are highly visible in their role. A lot of pressure on decision making, and they're responsible for a lot of people, the livelihood of a lot of people. And there's constant pressure to perform, constant pressure. That's, and that lack of recovery time. That's what allows burnout to sneak in, that lack of boundaries, the lack of recovery time, and the fear of falling behind. That's when burnout gets it clenches on and really digs in there. Perfectionism and 24/7 connectivity, that exposure that you feel like you don't have any time to yourself, the lack of boundaries, that's what fuels it. So energy management is one of the pieces that I talk to people who I'm coaching through burnout, or they have overcome it, but we've got to put some systems in place so that it doesn't reoccur. So energy management is really important. So building routines that help you do that. So when you're in a facility 24/7, you're not having boundaries. So I ask people this question: when you say yes to something, what are you saying no or not now to? Sometimes you have to say yes, but that means you have to say no to something else in order to have the balance. So that's one of the questions that I ask people to ask of themselves. Like, okay, realistically, what can you put on the back burner or delegate? This is really important to have a team to help support you. Not to say that I'm going to pass on my burnout to somebody else, but meaning have a support system in place so that you can either delegate tasks or use Eisenhower matrix. I go through that with a lot of leaders, like what is urgent right now? This has got to be done this morning, right now, this moment. What is urgent but not important, meaning like maybe I can do this later in the day or tomorrow? What is important, meaning I might be able to do this later in the week, put a timeline on it, block your calendar for when you're going to do it, and then what's not now, or not doing it at all, delegating, passing it on, or saying no to. So looking at these tasks, so you're not saying yes to everything, you've got to prioritize so that you can create some energy management and productivity. The other piece is that boundaries where people don't have access to you 24/7. There may be days where you do have to close the door to say, you just taking, 15 minutes for well-being. So they're meditating, they're taking a walk, because the other thing is high amounts of stress and cortisol coursing through your body is dangerous. It is dangerous. Inflammatory disease, cardiovascular disease, other things have been tied to these triggers of burnout with the high levels of cortisol and stress. So your body will give you a timeout if you don't. Like your brain fog starts to set in, other things, so you start to see these symptomologies, so you want to get ahead of that. So you got to have moments where you can take a time out whatever that looks like, for the time, and time block it. And the other piece is the mindset shift on always on. You can't have the mindset of always be on, because then your boundaries break down. So you want to have a strategically on, and when are the moments when you need to focus on the quality of presence over constantly being available. Because sometimes when you're constantly available, you're not at your heightened self anyway. So you're affecting your own productivity negatively if you're constantly on instead of strategically on. So that's what I would recommend to people. And know your triggers. Know your triggers so you can identify them. That's how you avoid recurrent burnout, by knowing the triggers. What are the things where you feel like it switches you from strategically on to constantly on? And then double click. Is that I'm afraid of failure? I'm afraid not to show up. I have an imposter thought. I feel like if I don't do this, then success measures by, inner critic. What is it? Double click. So I say pause, reflect, recalibrate, regulate your mindset, your emotions, breathe deeply, take a moment, and then intentionally act. And that also, the slow down to speed up, right? There's that expression, slow down to speed up. That's what I say, and what I usually coach people through this burnout situation, lack of boundaries. That I think can help people, especially just pause, just time out, take a moment.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, one of the biggest things that helped me in avoiding burnout, because I can work nonstop and be available 24/7. It's just kind of maybe the nature of what I'm doing right now, but I've really noticed a shift from chasing perfection to chasing excellence. Like, nothing is going to be perfect. Nothing. I can nitpick all I want, but sometimes there's like a fine line where it's like not good enough, but it's excellent. Like, this is getting the job done. So when I really look at that, and now when I'm leading a team, it's easy for me to like nitpick. I want it perfect. If it's excellent, if it needs work, it needs work. But if it's excellent, like, okay, we're keeping the ball rolling, and that helps me not really get burnout, or maybe not be hard on myself, because I'm not chasing perfectionism. Perfectionism is impossible. I'm chasing excellence. We were talking the other day about something very profound, to where if you don't manage this, like, it will creep up on you. And the number of people dying due to stress-related illnesses in their 40s and 50s, a lot of things go into that, a lot of factors. But if we just focus on the burnout, like, this doesn't just happen when you're 45 one day, now I'm burned out. This happened in your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been seeing in
Absolutely cumulative. You're right. So when we don't identify the triggers that were in it, I burned out in corporate. I was in the bowels of it, and my doctor diagnosed it for me. Not a clue. I just thought I was stressed out and overwhelmed. I didn't know I was in burnout, and I was symptomatic. He was like, knock it off. I was in my 40s. He was like, African-American people in their 40s with this amount of stress have heart attacks and strokes, knock it off. And then when I coached a woman who was 40 who had had a stroke, it really cemented for me, this is dangerous to our well-being. And perfectionism is one of fear of failure, perfectionism, and imposter thoughts are three of the things that I see the most large contributors. Perfectionism and trying to be perfect is the enemy of progress, period. Perfectionism is a fallacy. It doesn't exist. And if you hit it, then what? There's no growth? Good and done is better than trying to strive for perfect and getting in the way of progress. Because honestly, a lot of people put a lot more time and effort into trying to make something perfect instead of done, get it off the list, move on to the next. It impedes productivity and progress. And so I ask people if there's I try to give people like an awareness cue. Like, here's a self-reflection question you can ask yourself is like daily. Okay, I'm pausing. I'm asking myself, am I operating from a place of alignment and well-being or depletion? If you're operating from a place of depletion and overwhelm, that is dangerous, and that's not going to help you align to get what you want to accomplish, to achieve your goals. So asking yourself, am I energized right now, or am I feeling depleted? If I'm depleted, double click. What is depleting me? What do I need to get off my plate to do this? I need to stop being perfect about this document, this conversation, this engagement, this activity. Get it off the plate, get it done. If I can't delete it, if I can't delete it or delegate it or deplete, move on, get it done. Good and done is better than not done and trying to strive for perfect.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest things that I see almost stop people from doing something, maybe chasing a dream, or it's like, oh, well, they're almost giving themselves an excuse not to do it because it's not perfect, where then you're never gonna do it. And you're almost like you're living in that fear, just like you said there.
Yeah, the fear of failure. Fear of failure is a big one. We've got to normalize failure. I speak about athletes all the time when I talk about fear of failure, ironically, because they fail all day, all the time. Olympians fail, they get back at it, they try to get that gold, and they learn from their lessons. We have to normalize failure. Failing is where the lesson is. That's where we grow the most. If we win all the time, we're not learning as much as when we win or we lose and learn. So that's where the coach comes in, the leader. You have got to normalize failure. Nobody wants to not win the Super Bowl, but what did you learn from that? What can we do better? What do we individually take ownership of that we can learn and strengthen within our own skills? Where can we lean on each other as a team? I wonder, I'm always curious in the locker room. I wonder what the coach says, and does he say, what could I have done better as a coach? And not just put it on the athletes. What could I have done better to serve you, to empower you, to feel like you had what you needed to accelerate on the field? That ownership and vulnerability, that group think, that not being separatist, not being top down, that we're a team, we're an ecosystem. So that piece as well. But yeah, perfection gets in the way of a lot of things, and well-being is one of them.
Big time. Big time. Let's transition a little bit into the world of AI now. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, how it's affecting your world, and almost, it could be easy to have ChatGPT be your coach and ask it questions, and it's probably sometimes telling you what you want to hear. And it's very important, folks. You got to be using ChatGPT or any AI. You got to get in the habit of prompting. You have to, but you also need to look at it, with a grain of salt, and having a coach like yourself to be able to actually coach you and actually add a human element and your expertise and everything that goes into it, and not just a bot. How are you seeing AI play in your world, and how can maybe people use it but also really get the advantage of one-on-one coaching with an actual human?
Yeah. Hey, I use AI every day. I love it. I use ChatGPT, I use Perplexity. I'm starting to use Gemini more. Like, you find as, technology and AI is evolving, some AIs are better for some things than others. For instance, like as a thought partner, ChatGPT is great, but if you're looking for citations or research, anything that you can actually cite, Perplexity, elicit, Gemini might be better to get, specific statistics pulled in. If you're looking at, if you're a researcher like me, sometimes I'm quoting things from Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and things like that. So I'm trying to get it to be the central hub to pull, and then I pull from there. And the other thing is you have to double check your work. You can't just let AI say what they says and not research it and make sure that's an actual citation or a quote. It pulls in more information, works faster for you. It can help you make things more succinct if you're writing things like social media or other, if you're writing an article. It just helps you data dump, right? Get information out of your head onto a page so that you're not, having writer's block, or just, I don't know how to start something. I don't know how to, I've asked it like I'm talking to a person. I need to have this conversation with a person. How might I start the conversation and pull through this element so it sounds warm? Emails even, you can't always tell context and tone in emails. If you want to be professional but warm, or you want to be stern in an email and clear and transparent but not come across biased, you can ask those things and it'll suggest language. So things like that really help you. But I emphasize again, AI can never be human. So the human connection always comes from that interaction between people, and that's what builds trust and growth. So AI is a great tool, but you still need to approach it from a human aspect, which means you need some kind of human interaction. So, you've got to blend the analytics, the data, the AI with empathy. And the human element is the empathetic piece. And what's interesting is I read something yesterday. It was the World Economic Forum this month was reporting on AI because, I mean, AI is not going away. So how we adopt it, how we approach it, how we use it is day-to-day discussions in corporate, with all of the rifts, the reductions in force that have been happening and people being afraid that AI is going to replace their job and things like that. These are evolving conversations, right? But AI can't replace athletes. We know that as well. But it's redefining productivity and how people go about their work. And so that's why, this month they're talking about AI it's not just a technological shift, it's a sociological shift because it's in our social engagements every day now, like even on social media, where AI plays a part. So the piece that I think that's really important for us, especially organizations and anyone who's using it, on a productivity basis, or if they're using it to do someone's work, there has to be the ethics piece in there. No different than, the ethical piece in how we approach coaching within International Coaching Federation. Data governance, there has to be data governance. There has to be ethics. There has to be governance to make sure that it's fair, that it's ethical, that it's unbiased, that it's sustainable, and that keeping in mind that we're a human-centric society. So we have to protect privacy. We have to eliminate biases. We need to maintain transparency. So that piece, that's where the World Economic Forum was talking about. It's really important that AI, in any decision-making that we're using, when we're elevating or encouraging the use or using AI, it's crucial to foster trust in the technology and building that infrastructure of how it's going to be used worldwide. But we have to make sure it serves humanity first. It helps productivity, but it needs to serve humanity first. So I would say preparing for that shift is your mental mindset around AI and not being afraid that it's going to replace you or replace your job because you're human. It can't replace you. Creating what if scenarios, like what if I started using AI to help me draft better emails? Warming up, instead of being afraid of it. Emotional prep, like the agility around how can I bring emotional intelligence into using AI to make sure I feel like I trust it. There are some, like Perplexity, a lot of people use that because of privacy and confidentiality, because of the citations and quotes. So Gemini is another one that a lot of companies are using now because they want to protect privacy. So I think those are some of the things to think about when you're using AI, and play with it, experiment with it, see which one is the best suited for you that you like to use for whatever you want to use it for, and start small and then explore. Be curious in how you're exploring it. And if you don't like it, don't use it. If you're in a workplace and you're forced to use it, talk to your manager or your leader about your concerns and ask them to send you to a course. There's tons of course, trainingmagazine.com or .org. I think I go up to a lot of their webinars. They're doing a lot of free webinars right now on AI technology, how to leverage it. And usually it's from a learning and development perspective, because most of us who are part of Training Magazine as members are either facilitators, trainers, coaches like myself, but you'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot from that perspective. And even just Googling on LinkedIn, like AI, they've got free webinars on there too, all the time.
I completely agree with all of that. And then, I say all the time, AI is not going to replace jobs. People that know how to use AI is going to replace jobs. Because just like you said, it's never going to be human. But if it can make you that much more productive to allow you to be human that much more, like that's where the advantage comes in. Before we jump back into the show, a quick shout out to one of our proud sponsors, Gardner Roofing. If you're looking for a roofer you can trust, Gardner Roofing has been Colorado's go-to team since 1998. They're family owned, built on integrity, and they treat every roof like it's their own. Whether it's repairs, a full replacement, or just a free inspection, Gardner Roofing is the name Colorado trusts. Check them out at gardnerroofs.com or give them a call at 303-332-6224. Gardner Roofing, their family has your family covered. Laila, this has been huge. Where could, is there anything else that you want to, last comments that you want to impart our guests on, and where could people find you at and follow some of the great stuff that you're doing?
Oh, I appreciate it. One, they can find me on my website, NovaQuestCoaching.com, or I post a lot on LinkedIn, a lot of insights, articles that, move me, that resonate with my mission to help people have a healthier experience in conscious leadership and evolving in today's world with increasing emotional intelligence, cognitive diversity, how we're thinking, how we're bringing a humanistic approach to leadership and making it a healthier experience, avoiding burnout, things like that. So I have articles that I highlight on my LinkedIn at Laila Keith as well. And sometimes I put stuff on my Instagram as well at NovaQuest Coaching, beyond LinkedIn. If someone's not a LinkedIn person, they're more of a social media like Facebook or Instagram person, they can find me on Instagram at NovaQuest Coaching. But I encourage people I really want the takeaway for people to think today about, if you take anything away, pause. Conscious leadership is about being able to be intentional and purposeful in our mindset and our actions. And to do that, we have to slow down. So just take a moment sometimes and pause to check in with yourself. Pause, reflect. Where am I operating from? Ask some really inquisitive questions of yourself, like, am I feeling depleted? Am I energized? Am I feeling afraid? So that you can then pick the intentional action that best serves your overall goal of what you're trying to accomplish, and do incremental goals. Don't bite off something so big that you feel like you're failing every day. You're not honoring or honoring your vision. Small incremental steps for the win is what I say, and then celebrate them. We don't celebrate our wins enough. We only celebrate the big ones. If I wanted to clear my schedule for everything I wanted to do this week and I did that, that's a win. If I wanted to get an email out and I felt really good about that email, that's a win. So celebrating and really small incremental steps and being self-aware can really go a long way. And I hope people take something out of this today, one thing that they might do differently that, we touched on, that makes them feel like, wow, I just unlocked more energy, or I unlocked some clarity. I unlocked some awareness about myself. I unlocked a tool that I can use to help me. I hope that's what they get out of today.
That's awesome. This has been a great conversation. I love a lot of the points that you made, folks. If this piques your interest at all, go check out some of the content that she has. A lot of great free stuff on her website too. And, reach out if you're in a spot where you're feeling burned out, maybe don't know how to handle it. There's a great resource for you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure you subscribe to the Fan Day Nation so you don't miss out on future episodes, and we'll see you next time.